What becomes a legend most? The history books are filled with flawed geniuses. But how many drew the same kind of devotion as Diego Armando Maradona? What made the short in size but larger-than-life soccer genius a one-of-a-kind icon? As Argentina and the footballing world grieve their pibe de oro, we'll ask about the ups and downs of a star whose career coincided with the rise of cable TV, the consecration of a sport gone global. The son of a South American nation whose roller coaster fortunes since the days of the generals in the 1970s often mirrored those of its golden child. What place in the pantheon of sporting greats? What legacy for a Maradona who conquered the world and burned the candle at both ends along the way? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the legacy of Diego Maradona. Joining us, Financial Times football editor and columnist Simon Cooper. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
From London, journalist Jimmy Burns, the author of Maradona, The Hand of God. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good evening.
In a previous life, he was France 24 Argentina correspondent David Gormazano, senior editor at France24.com. How are you?
Good evening, Francois. I'm fine.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Never will there be an equal. That is the front page headline of Buenos Aires Daily Clarín, Wednesday's passing at age 60 of Diego Maradona, rocking the entire planet to its core. Valerie de Kemp has more.
This was the goal that made Diego Armando Maradona, a spectacular 60-meter weave through 5 English players. In 2002, it was voted the best goal in World Cup history. But there was another goal scored only minutes earlier with his hand that made him an instant football legend. The hand of God, he cheekily called it afterwards, but the referee hadn't seen the foul and allowed the goal. Argentina went on to win the World Cup in 1986. Born in a shanty town outside Buenos Aires, the footballing legend was only 10 when his talent was spotted. At 16, he started his professional career, playing for Boca Juniors in Argentina before setting Spain and Italy alight with his skills. But 15 years on, some of the shine was taken off his glorious reputation when Argentina lost the 1990 World Cup to West Germany. Less than a year later, Maradona was suspended from football for 15 months after failing a drug test for cocaine. He was sent home from the 1994 World Cup after again testing positive for drugs. In 1997, Maradona retired from professional football and has since been blighted by ill health and weight gain. In 2004, he had to fight for his life after a heart attack. In retirement, Maradona also became more outspoken. In 2005, he joined a left-wing protest train outside the Summit of the Americas, denouncing the presence of then-President George W. Bush.
It's a great honor to be an Argentine and to board this train to condemn this piece of human trash, George W. Bush.
In 2008, he made an unlikely comeback as Argentina's coach after having inspired an entire generation of players.
I'd love to play again, but my time has passed.
But after a quarter-final exit at the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, Maradona was ousted, ultimately picking up another coaching job with the United Arab Emirates club Al Wasl. Over the years, he has remained idolized in Argentina and around the world as one of the best players to have ever played the game.
Before we go to our panel, let's go to Abuja, Nigeria. We know him in this country as a Bordeaux legend, Gernot Rohr, manager of the Super Eagles, Nigeria's national football team. What for you would be your signature Diego Maradona moment when you think back?
Yeah, good evening, Franois Bonsoir. Yes, for me, it was one of the best opponents I ever played against. You know that I was charged sometimes from Aimé Jacquet, our former coach in Girondins de Bordeaux, to play against the playmaker of the other team. And in 1983, we played with Girondin Bordeaux at home against FC Barcelona, and he asked me to take this Diego Maradona, this fantastic artist. So I tried to do the best, and in this match we even won the game. It was a friendly. It was for a celebration of the 100 years of the club, anniversary of Girondin de Bordeaux. And this was a very, very nice match. The stadium was full, the Parc Lescure, and we could celebrate even a little victory against the great Barcelona. And what I retain from this match is that he didn't run so much, but he was unpredictable in all what he did, and it was really difficult for me to play against him. I played against other great players like Johan Cruyff, like Michel Platini, but this one was very special with his left foot, and he was able with one touch to eliminate me. And after the match, I asked him, Diego, can you give me your jersey for my son? And he gave it to me, and we could have this wonderful souvenir at home, and my son is still very happy to have it.
And tell us, Maradona is the name you think of alongside of Pele. Where you are right now in Nigeria, what's the lasting imprint of Maradona? We talked about it in the introduction of him as a flawed genius. How do Nigerians see him around you?
The same thing everywhere in Africa. Everywhere I worked before, in Gabon, Burkina Faso, Tunisia, Niger, everywhere it's a legend. It's everywhere the people are in big admiration for him, what he did. They forget the little things who happened also in this life who were not so unlucky, but everybody is remembering what he did on the pitch. It was one of the best. I could play against him again in '88 when he was in Napoli. We played the European Cup with Bordeaux, and they beat us 1-0. I remember what happened in the tunnel before we go to the pitch. All the teammates of Diego are crying, Diego, 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 to motivate him and to stimulate him, and he made the difference. We lost the match 1-0. He was a hero for his team. He was, for the opponents, was something very dangerous, of course. And in the second game in Napoli, we made 0-0, but they were qualified because of Diego. It was a fantastic player. So me personally, I retain his fairness and this jersey he gave to me, to my family, and he will be missed, I think, for so many people, and not only for me.
Gernot, many thanks for speaking with us live here on France 24. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Simon Cooper, you heard their former Bordeaux defender and current manager of Nigeria, Gernot, talk. I think if there's one adjective we can recall from what we just heard, it's the word unpredictable.
Francois, I've lost you. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. I was saying simply how we heard Gernot describe Maradona as unpredictable. And that's something that's come up a lot in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I think the thing about Maradona, the reason why unpredictable works is that he really didn't play in a team. He didn't need a system particularly. His teammates just had to get him the ball somehow, or he would drop into defense to get it. And then he would dribble and he would beat three men and create a situation. If you remember his goal, he created for Canija against Brazil in 1990. He does everything. The whole Brazilian defense comes to him, and then he puts Canija free in front of goal, or he scores himself. And that's very different from any other player we've seen. Pelé played in a great Brazilian team. Cruyff kind of orchestrated the Dutch team. Cruyff was the coach on the field. Messi has spent his whole career in a wonderful orchestrated Barcelona team. Maradona did it alone, and that's part of the reason why people love him so much. It was the individual against the system. It was the little man. It was the guy who looks like he'd just come out of a slum, the guy who didn't look like a professional footballer beating the world.
Yeah, because he also physically didn't look like it.
Yeah, he looked like a slum dweller. He looked like a guy who you would meet in Villa Fiorito, the slum he came from in Buenos Aires, the shanty town outside town. He was unfit. He was often overweight. He was on drugs from the early 80s. You know, if you think of footballers today, you know, not an ounce of extra fat. You know, that was not Maradona. And in fact, if you looked at the lineup, this guy who stands out physically for not being an athlete, you could immediately intuit, well, he must be a genius because he doesn't have the kind of physical attributes you would expect.
So if we look at the newspapers, a few more of them this Thursday, immortality, a recurring theme. Argentine sports daily Ole listing his dates on its front page as 1960 infinity. French sports daily L'Equipe stating pretty bluntly that, well, God is dead, and changing its masthead from red to Argentine sky blue, while UK tabloid The Daily Mirror putting Maradona in the hands of God. Jimmy Burns, the hand of God, what do you think when that's what shows up on the front page?
What do I think? I mean, I think the whole thing's completely blown out of all proportion. But I mean, I mean, the hand of God was purposely a double entendre. But I think what we're watching at the moment is mass hysteria and very Argentine and very emotional. What's going on in the Casa Rosada and in the Plaza de Mayo, I mean, defies even what I've learned of being a correspondent in Buenos Aires over many years. But I mean, let's get back into reality. You know, he may well be having a mud day as we speak, and I hope he is with God Almighty upstairs, as we've seen in some of the cartoons, and I hope he is. I also hope he would find eternal life. But to say that simply because Diego Maradona has died, that God is dead, I think it's pushing it a bit far.
Pushing it a bit far, it's a bit of a hyperbole, I grant you. Nonetheless, Jimmy, what I'm...
Well, it might be an understatement. It might be an understatement on my behalf, which is another way of putting it. Come on, let's be real. You know, people are talking about, you know, he's the people's champion. You know, he is a genius on the pitch. He was an absolute disaster outside it. He left a trail of destruction behind him, not least with his own family. He was very badly advised. I mean, Simon was touching on how football has evolved or not evolved and whether people are fat or not these days or well-dieted or fit or not. The fact is that Diego Maradona had appalling managers. He led a totally decadent life off the pitch. And he surrounded himself with pretty nasty people, some of whom I came across when I was researching the biography, not least in Naples.
All right, let's turn to another former Buenos Aires correspondent. David Gormazano, you had upfront encounters with Diego Maradona a couple times. Does that correspond to the image you've just heard from Jimmy Burns?
Yes, in a way. I mean, the passion of the Argentines for Diego Maradona is very genuine. I think they loved the man, and they were ready to excuse all this behavior that was sometimes
explain to us the bad behavior. You know, in French, especially in cycling, we have a term un mauvais garçon, a bad boy, but it's kind of a compliment as well as a fault that you're putting towards somebody. But how do Argentines see it when he behaves as poorly as Jimmy Burns has just spelled it out?
Well, I think they brush it aside mostly. You will. Some Argentines were not happy with many aspects of Maradona's life, about what he could say about certain issues. But at the end of the day, he was the guy who gave back Argentina some pride after the Falklands War. And I think that across the spectrum, across Argentine society, what happened in the 1986 World Cup would excuse anything anything he could do, anything he could say.
Yeah, because we had that communique from the French president talking about the most important geopolitical footballing event ever, that match in June of 1986, quarterfinals of the World Cup, talking about Margaret Thatcher's England basically against Diego Maradona. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Did the French president go too far with that statement he put out late Wednesday?
Well, I will not comment. I mean, he talked as well about his remembrance as a kid, buying football magazines, and so yeah, there was a lot of stuff in that communique, in that statement. Sorry, but I think Maradona is one of the last, maybe, of great footballers who really involved himself in politics. I mean, Diego Maradona is a guy who could talk to crowds, who could talk to the media about various issues. So there was the Anglo-Argentine War of the 80s, and he was vocal about it.
And then there was that train trip to the summit of the Americas. You were there covering it.
I was one of the journalists aboard that train. So,
and there were all these left-wing Latin American leaders there as well.
Yes, there was one leader to be who was on the train. That was Evo Morales. He was 1 month away from his first election as Bolivian president, and he was in the train. And later on, so the train was going from Buenos Aires to Mar del Plata, where the summit was taking place, and there was this extraordinary scene in the football stadium of Mar del Plata, who was built for the 1978 World Cup. And on stage, you had Hugo Chavez, you had Evo Morales, you had Diego Maradona, and a few others. And later on, there was massive riots in the streets. And later on again, so George Bush came to Mar del Plata with heavy security. And the two big leaders of South America at the time, Nestor Kirchner and Lula da Silva, told George W. Bush, well, your free trade treaty going from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, south of Argentina.
And Maradona and all this?
That's not going to happen.
And Maradona and all of this?
And Maradona, extremely happy, followed by Emir Kusturica's camera. Kusturica had started filming his documentary in 2005. It was later released in 2008. And he was very relaxed.
At ease playing politics. We're going to pick up on that when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. On the day of the funeral of Diego Maradona, we're asking about what legacy the Argentine legend will leave with Simon Cooper, Financial Times football editor and a columnist who joins us from the French capital. Jimmy Burns, author of Maradona, The Hand of God, is in London. And here in the studio, David Gormazano, senior editor at France24.com, who was describing a Maradona at ease with politics back in the 2000s, after he was no longer a player. The emotion running high, not just in Buenos Aires, it's just as raw in Naples. We can show you the scene on Wednesday evening in a city that never forgot 1987 when Maradona led his club there to southern Italy's first ever Serie A title. A journalist at the time asked how a first ever Scudetto for Napoli compared to Argentina's first ever World Cup win in 1978.
Ho vinto qualcosa, però campione del mondo. No, il problema è che non l'ho vinto nella mia terra, capito? Mi hanno tolto di festeggiare nella mia terra nel 78. Per quello questa è la festa più importante della mia vita.
Napoli, che significa per te a questo punto?
Mia casa sicuramente.
Naples is now my home. Simon Cooper, there you heard saying, I couldn't celebrate in my land in 1978. Of course, he'd been left out of the World Cup winning squad in 1978 by coach Cesar Menotti. But it was also, and that's what the allusion is there, it's to politics and the time of the generals, saying he couldn't celebrate there at the time.
Yeah, I mean, initially he was quite politically naive. And so when the generals began celebrating him as a teenager and when he won the Youth World Cup in 1979, he was sort of quite happy with it. He liked the fact that the leaders of the nation were saying nice things about him. It was later, as with many Argentines, that he gained awareness of what had happened under the junta, and he became horrified by it. And all his life, really, Argentina declined politically. There was the horrors of the military regime, and afterwards there were constant economic crises. And he, I think, came to see himself as the true spiritual leader of the nation, the incarnation of Argentina. And the politicians were just kind of pretend prophets who always did bad things to Argentinians. He represented the country, and he brought it its greatest triumph in 1986, a World Cup that was, in a way, more important for Argentinians than 1978 because it wasn't tarnished by the horrendous surround of the military regime. And it was won with beautiful football. It was won by the football that Argentinians had had in their heads since the 1920s. Not the rest of the team, but Maradona, a football of creativity and dribbles. So 1986, which is also the beginning of civilian rule, a relatively optimistic period, it kind of stands out, if you look back on Argentina, as the kind of the beautiful moment after the fall and before the next fall. And so I think he came to see himself as both the incarnation of the nation and also, like many great Argentinian heroes, as a kind of Catholic sacrificial saint who gave of his flesh, who punished himself physically to redeem the nation's sins. This sounds a bit high-blown, but I think Jimmy would say that in Argentina it makes more sense. So he became the Evita Perón of his time, and he will have a funeral like Evita's despite the pandemic, which, having seen the images just now, looks like a very potential super spreader event, I'm afraid.
Jimmy Burns, I mean, I remember well that quarterfinal in 1986. And of course, it was laden with political significance.
Well, yeah, I mean, how can one forget it? It was Falklands round two. It was Malvinas Venganza. It was all there, the whole drama, the political drama of it. And poor old Bobby Robson, who I interviewed for the book, I mean, he dreaded the whole thing. Berardo was loving it, and so was the entire Argentine team. Yeah, I mean, it was obviously, hugely emotional. The whole thing was, the Barras Bravas out there waving their Argentine flags, jumping up and down like they used to do during the Falklands War. And for me, it sort of brought back the worst of the Argentines, quite frankly. But off the pitch. But of course, as Simon rightly says, it was a moment of beautiful football. Argentina playing probably the best game or a World Cup of their history, and all thanks to this one genius on the pitch.
And do you agree? Do you agree with Simon? Do you agree with Simon that what we're witnessing now is an Evita Perón moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, Simon, in due respect, I think pitched that straight out of my biography. Actually, I did sort of predict several years ago when I wrote the first edition that whenever Diego dies, and we don't quite know when he will die, but he will die eventually, his funeral will be as big, if not bigger, than Evita Perón's, quote unquote. And that's exactly what we're seeing. But look, I can't let this go by. I mean, this question, this painting of Diego as the great politician, the great liberator, the great people's liberator, it's all complete balls, really. I mean, really, I mean, we've got to get some sort of reality check on this. I mean, I wasn't in Mar del Plata that day, but I bloody followed it, I mean, this was serious business to suggest that Maradona was the new Che Guevara of the continent, that somehow he was emerging as the new Perón. It totally defies any sense of reality. I mean, it's pure delusion. And I mean, the point about Diego Maradona and the reason that Argentines obsessed with him is that they belong to a totally failed state. And the only export they've ever really had, apart from Fangio, is Diego Maradona, and he's a world icon, loved around the world because of his genius on the pitch. And, I remember when I was doing the book.
But hang on, Jimmy, are you not overlooking a certain Lionel Messi?
Sorry?
Are you not overlooking
Messi, we can talk about Messi if you like, but I mean, as Simon knows as well as I do and has written about it, Messi's problem is that he'll never be as loved by the Argentines as Diego, for a very simple reason that he spent since the age of 13 outside Argentina, which is something that Diego never did. I mean, that's another subject. But I'm just talking about the politics of it. I mean, let us not forget. All right, he didn't play in the 78 World Cup, but in 1979, he played in the Youth Championship in Tokyo and came back and with Videla and the whole bloody junta, went into the Casa Rosada and went out onto the balcony and showed his wonderful trophy with the junta behind him. Let's not forget that.
David Gormazana, you agree that we're making too much of Maradona?
We, or the Argentines?
Yeah.
I think I think Maradona is. I mean, I'm 50, and since I'm the age of 10, I've been passionate about football, and Maradona is in the pantheon of great footballers. So and about the politics, as Jimmy was saying, I think Maradona reflects very well the Argentines, the people. I think he didn't have a great expertise on world affairs.
So he's not the vanguard of the revolution. He reflects his times, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think he disliked the US, and I think in Argentina, disliking the US is something you share across the political spectrum, whether you're right wing or left wing. He was very nationalistic. He was fascinated by Latin American brotherhood, although he was also very Argentine, and there was the war with Brazil and Pelé, and that's very Argentinian as well. Argentines don't like Brazilians, Brazilians don't like Argentines. I think he reflected so well, and he was defiant. Sometimes he liked the media, he liked to be exposed, he liked to be on camera. Sometimes he was insulting journalists and he would turn them away. Sometimes he loved people coming to him, and another moment he would be very rude and turn people away. Many things that during my stay in Argentina sounded very Argentinian.
All right, among all of the different reactions, there was one I want to focus on with you, Simon Cooper, a statement of condolences from the Vatican late on Wednesday, one that quoted the first ever Pope, who's an Argentinian citizen, Francis, who is a staunch San Lorenzo fan. What does that say about the world we live in right now?
As Jimmy has written, I didn't actually remember the opening of his Maradona biography, which is a wonderful book, but I read it nearly 25 years ago. As Jimmy has said about the Pope, he's a Peronista politician to his fingertips. He is very attuned to the common style, the popular style, the little secondhand Renault that he drives, his love of a small football team. He's able brilliantly in this Peronista way to present himself as a man of the people, even though he's an aged virgin living in a palace. And so he is always understood. He loves football, but he's always understood the political uses of football. Maradona, as well as being very Argentinian, as David and Jimmy has said, is also very Catholic in his style, in his formation. And so he has always been interested in popes. And when he went to meet John Paul II in the Vatican, John Paul, also a big football fan, said very nice things to him. And Maradona was just thinking, hang on, there's all this gold in this palace. Why not sell it and give it to the poor? So he'd absorbed a kind of crude version of liberation theology. So I think the Pope and Maradona would have had a lot to talk about. In this picture, they clearly did have something to talk about. They come from the same, Jimmy calls it, failed state, same love of football, same Peronista family background, and I think a lot in common.
Jimmy Burns, your reaction when you look at those images of the Pope with Maradona?
Well, Simon and me, in fact, we pretend we disagree, but we agree most of the time, and I love him to bits, as he knows. I mean, except that he's not a Catholic and I am. I mean, again, this idea that somehow, and the second time in the evening that Simon bashes on about this sort of Catholicism of Diego Maradona. I mean, again, I'm sorry, this is complete nonsense. I mean, this is a man who consistently has broken even, and I'm a liberal Catholic, but every rule in the book, in terms of the Catholic book, and I'm not going to catalogue them, and I wouldn't want to sort of spoil your listeners' evening. But I mean, he really has. What I do accept, which Simon has said, is the sort of common ground of Peronismo. I think that there's a certain common ground that Francis sees in Diego Maradona as the kid that came from the shanty town. Let us not forget that Cardinal Bergoglio, the current Pope, really came into his own as a priest in the shanty town. And he identifies with that. He identifies with the periphery, as he often talks about. And Simon's absolutely right. The contrast between his relationship with Pope Francis and the total non-relationship he had with John Paul II is glaring and speaks volumes.
We talked earlier about Lionel Messi. Let's revisit that for a second, because we saw the initial reaction, sign of the times, David. It was on Instagram. A lot of the reactions are on social media. They're not in front of a journalist's microphone. A sad day for all Argentines and for football. He's not gone because Diego's eternal. And he sends his condolences to family and friends. A carefully crafted statement there. Your reaction to the fact that you have the death of Maradona, and the reaction to that comes from Instagram.
Well, frankly, we're so much into this, and we're talking about social media, and social media has been part of our lives for a few years now. So, yeah, it allows Lionel Messi to express in his own words at the time he chooses, and I think that's our times now.
Simon, as you write the final pages of your upcoming book on Barcelona, and just remind our viewers, Maradona, former Barcelona players, your thoughts on the fact that we have these carefully crafted statements after such a significant moment.
Well, don't forget, Messi was coached by Maradona, which is a dreadful experience. Maradona was coach of Argentina at the World Cup 2010. He's the only coach who's ever devised a system that managed to stop Lionel Messi, which is you give him the ball at the back of midfield after endless, very slow passing, by which time the opposition has 10 men lying in wait, and you say to him, Leo, do it alone now. So I don't think Messi's memories of that World Cup, which ended with a 4-0 defeat to Germany, are very happy. He will have seen what a charlatan Maradona was as a coach. And the thing about Messi is he's not really interested in other footballers. He didn't grow up hero worshipping Maradona. Messi knows almost nothing about football history. He's not interested. He's not awed by it. He's not awed by Maradona, because Messi always knew that he was the best. And what Messi has over Maradona is that Messi did it every week. This season may be the end of it, but he did it every week for 15 years. Maradona did it very occasionally. Maradona was Maradona a few times over the years, as Santiago Segura has written. Messi was Messi every week. I mean, he's of a professionalism that Maradona could not possibly have aspired to. And he's played in much better teams as well. So he's a different kind of player. He's the individual genius like Maradona, but he's also the player of combinations, which Maradona never even wanted to be.
And the fact that, it's a more scientific sport than it used to be. When you think back to the start of Maradona's career in the late 70s, football was a very different game. A lot of people over the last 24 hours expressing nostalgia when there was more improvisation, when there was more unpredictability.
Yeah, but it was a much worse game. I mean, any top side of today would take apart any top side of 40, 50 years ago. on tactics, on pace, on strength. It was a game of rock stars in Maradona's time. Maradona was one of the last footballers as rock star. You just couldn't live like that now. You wouldn't survive a month in a team like Barcelona. And so, people want Messi to be more of a rock star. Well, that doesn't really exist anymore. I'm sorry. It's not possible to be a Maradona today. So when people relish Maradona's times, they're also indulging in a kind of nostalgia for an era that will never come back.
Jimmy Burns, do you miss the old days?
Yeah, I have to say again, I agree with you, Simon. You'll be glad to know. Very well put, and I think it is one needs reminding, but one of the things that obviously changed, and in fairness to Diego, and Pele had it as well, but Diego in spades, as Simon well knows, that particularly when he was in FC Barcelona, he got hacked to death. Almost hacked to death. But at the time when referees turned a blind eye, when rules weren't the kind of rules we had now. So he was not only indulging off the pitch, but also dealing with people like the so-called butcher of Bilbao, Goycochea, who literally kind of hacked his leg and broke it, in a foul that should have had him expelled from football for the rest of his life, and he wasn't. So, my heart goes out to Diego in that respect, that he, even playing the fewer games, as Simon says, than Messi, it was just extraordinary resilience of the man after an all-night orgy of drug taking and women without training to still manage, certainly in the early days, to produce some sublime football. But of course, it was a short life. And I think for me, reflecting on the last 48 hours of his death, I think it's a real tragedy that, that Diego Maradona wasn't born in a different time, much later in a sort of more modern football era where he would have been better managed, better protected, better advised, just like Messi has been. And we could have gone on seeing his sublime beauty of play well into his 30s, just like we've seen Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo.
David Gormazano, you agree?
That football is boring today, and it was heroic in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, a bit. Yeah.
That's not what the panel's saying here. You find it boring today. You find it more boring than it used to be.
Yeah, a bit. Yeah. The French victory in 2018 in the World Cup, I didn't find it very inspiring. They played wonderfully. They won all the games. They went all the way.
So you preferred the era when you had these rock stars like Maradona, like Platini.
Yeah. There was, I don't know. Maybe it's because it's my childhood, and it's just memories of my childhood to make those games bigger than they were. But no, I think they were the improvisation, as it was said, and the personality. I think that the players and coaches had a lot of personality, and you were talking about social media and crafted statement and everything. Yeah, it's true that now all coaches, all players talk the same language, and they learn from a very early age how to speak to the media. And now, a few years ago, it was a bit different, and sometimes you had personalities. In France, we have Eric Cantona, which I think could be the closest thing to Maradona.
Long retired, though. Do you take David's point, Simon Cooper?
I think that this year footballers have showed an activism, a political activism that I haven't seen in 40 years, ever, in the time that I've been thinking about football. The demonstrations for Black Lives Matter, football teams taking a knee, Marcus Rashford in Britain getting the British government to provide free school meals for poor children during the summer holidays. A lot of players coming out and making personal statements like Raheem Sterling about the lack of black coaches. I am actually very impressed by this generation of footballers. And I mean, there was a wildness to someone like Maradona that is unique, but I agree with Jimmy, is not particularly admirable in so many ways in his statements. I mean, you know, when he's talking about Bush, I mean, I myself thought Bush was a terrible president, but Maradona was another guy who had thought things out and could articulate them in a serious way. So I'm much more impressed in many ways with today's footballers.
All right, and one final question. I'll put it to you, Jimmy Burns. When you hear the last 24 hours, all those arguments about Pele versus Maradona, what's your reaction?
What are you asking me? Who's the best player in all time? Is the usual question, or not?
No, what I'm asking you is people suddenly delving into the past and trying to get that long view. And we've been having this discussion this hour, right, about whether or not you can compare different eras.
No, that is a valid question, and obviously, you know, whenever I'm asked, and as you can imagine, you know, Simon's asked this the whole time. I mean, you know, who is the best player ever? You know, one has to keep reminding ourselves that you have to judge people by their time and not quite their season, but their time in history and the context. We've been talking about what football was then, what football's now. And, you know, you can't judge Di Stefano in the same way as you judge my childhood memory was 7 years old in the Bernabeu in Madrid, where I was born, going to see Di Stefano. You know, he wasn't a rock star. He was a bloody good player. But you know, he played in a different context. And I think, you know, Pele, Cruyff, Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, for me, all deserve to be in the pantheon of gods with Maradona.
All needs deserve to be in that pantheon. I want to thank you so much, Jimmy Burns, for joining us from London. I want to thank Simon Cooper, David Gorbazano.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.